Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery.
Hi, my name is John Lavitt, and I am the Principal Content Creator for Tarzana Treatment Centers. Welcome to our latest episode of Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery. This episode is the second installment of what is going to be an ongoing series in which we bring in outside experts in the field of recovery from many different perspectives. And the idea is that they're going to lend their expertise and their experience and their knowledge, their hope and their perspective to the idea of what the road to recovery is all about, and specifically on how it might apply to a large nonprofit organization like Tarzana Treatment Centers. So today I'm really happy to introduce Dr. David Wiss, who's an old friend of mine. He is a mental health nutritionist who's also a functional medicine certified practitioner. Did I get that right, David?
You got it right. My longtime friend, John, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to build some energy with you today.
David, I've known you for many years, and I've so respected and appreciated your journey. You've become an expert and a really positive voice in our community when it comes to nutrition and recovery. You're very much on the cutting edge of whole person treatment, and on the idea that if you don't treat the root causes and you don't treat what is behind an addiction, a substance use disorder, or a mental health condition, then you're not actually treating it.
That's right.
You're just treating part of it. So, at Tarzana Treatment Centers, we do an array of services. One thing that we do at TTC is we deal with substance use disorders. And we do it both in like an inpatient residential context and also an outpatient context. I'm wondering, how could we use nutrition, which we do already, but how could we do it better to help our patients both in a residential or adult patients? Let's start with adults. Both in a residential inpatient context and also in detox, and also in an outpatient context.
Yeah, when I started my recovery journey, there was a lot of treatment centers that said substance use disorder or addiction, and now the field has expanded to cover mental health because we know that substance use disorders cluster and co-occur with anxiety, depression, trauma, and many other conditions. And so we now know that nutrition can be critical in the management of some of the underlying causes of addictions. Depression, anxiety, trauma, etc. It's a challenging road for a lot of people to change behaviors with respect to nutrition, because nutrition, or food I should say, acts on the same neurochemical pathways as many drugs of misuse. So people that have a history of substance use disorder do tend to cross-addict and have what people call comfort eating, emotional eating, or even addiction-like eating. And this makes intervening particularly challenging. I've been in situations where we teach people in early recovery about healthy eating, we try to improve the food environment, but people still need familiar foods, comfort foods, easily digestible foods. So when we bring nutrition education into treatment, it's really important to match changes in the food service environment with some education, some sort of a group or some sort of a coach, someone there who's championing the cause. There has to be someone who's really excited about eating differently so that person can be an example. I have conducted some research in treatment settings, and what we found is that for organizational change to happen, it is important to get the staff on board. So if you have a lot of staff members who are disinterested in improving their relationship with food, it's hard to ask the clients and the patients to do that. So I've actually done some interventions.
So if you see a staff member eating a Twinkie it's hard to convince you to eat vegetables.
You're serving food and you're saying you should eat this, but I just went to the fast food joint and I'm taking this to the office and we've got the good stuff. You guys have to suffer with the healthy food. It creates this gap. And so I do believe that staff training to get people to understand the link between nutrition and mental health is critical for building a culture in the organization where people understand not just the benefits of healthy eating, but how it links to gut health and brain health. And when someone's in detox, when someone's in the early levels of care, a lot of people have argued that this is the time to just let someone be, let them get through their immediate crises, and then we can talk about it later. A lot of other people are arguing that no, this is the key time where we want to step in, provide education, provide foods that have more fiber, more antioxidants in the colors of fruits and vegetables, more protein, better fats through nuts and seeds, avocado, coconut, olives, that this is the actual time when the brain is changing, and that there's some debate in the field about how aggressive to be. And I do think that different organizations see it differently, and I think there's truth to all of it.
Okay. I have a question for you based on my own personal experience. As you know, I have been sober now for over 17 years.
Beautiful.
So I'm on my own journey of recovery. You know about the rehab I went to. It was the Jewish rehab, Beit Teshuvah. And when I was there, you know, my drugs had been taken away.
Yes.
I had to be sober. My best friend was taken away. And I desperately wanted to replace it. I have felt this hole inside of me. I had not begun dealing with the trauma or the root causes. So I must admit, like, sugar, salt, at that point in time, cigarettes, coffee. Oh my God, Starbucks became like my den of iniquity.
The highlight of the day.
The highlight of the day.
Yes.
Or we get to go to Taco Bell or McDonald's or something. And the fact is, like, even if, particularly the fast foods, even if they made me feel worse later, I didn't care about what happened later because I was still in the mind frame of being an addict. And I just wanted that first bite.
Yes.
I just wanted that first experience. It was like, in a sense, the same thing, how, like, you know, like, I take the first drink and then the second drink takes me.
Sure.
It's the same thing with food. How do you deal with that with people in early recovery?
So in the early recovery process, most people are dealing with trauma, uncertainty, a lot of unresolved stress, and the brain is set up to prioritize immediate crises management over long-term goals, right? So one way to think about it neurochemically is that the prefrontal cortex can be offline, where there isn't easy access to the ability to weigh pros and cons. We call it executive functioning. As I was saying before, most people know what healthy eating is, right? It's not that people don't know, it's that the brain is set up for reward-seeking behavior, particularly in early recovery. I also got into recovery at the same facility in 2006.
Well, that's how we met.
That's how we met. And prior to that experience, I had gone to a few other places and I did the predictable comfort eating path, right? Caffeine, nicotine, sugar, ultra-processed foods, some food before bed to go to sleep. When I got into recovery in 2006, it was different because I had deep intrinsic motivation for a different life, and I truly believed that things could be different, and I went out of my way to request vegetables. I think they put the salad bar out for me because I was like, I need colorful food. No one ever told me what I should eat. I just knew it was all the things that I had been avoiding my whole life, right? I didn't need a dietitian. I didn't need someone to break down to me calories or macronutrients. I just knew that food from the earth in its original state was going to be supportive of me.
By the way, just one thing there, because you mentioned the salad bar. One thing that I was so impressed by, as you know, Tarzana Treatment Centers is not a Malibu rehab.
Sure.
You know, It's not one of these like fancy dancy on the beach. You have a chauffeur and you have a butler and you have a personal chef
Right.
type of rehabs, you know?
Yes.
It's really focusing on providing services for everyone,
That's
and,
right.
and particularly for disadvantaged populations.
Yes.
So I was surprised when I went into one of their cafeterias for the patients, right? And I saw this incredible salad bar, you know, that had like 20 different choices of like vegetables and dressings and toppings.
All the
and
colors of the
whatever.
rainbow.
All the colors of
Yes.
the rainbow.
Yes.
And I was thinking, wow, this is the type of thing which can appeal to someone in early recovery because it gives them the sense that they have choice.
That's right.
The salad bar gives them a sense of like, okay, you know what? I don't like that, and they're not forcing it on me, but I can choose what I like.
Yes.
And the salad bar, in a sense, allows for healthy eating to play into that early addiction mindset,
Yes.
post-addiction mindset.
But that food doesn't elicit a strong neurochemical response, so a lot of people aren't going to be drawn to it, right? Particularly if there's a lot of food aversions that came from childhood. And I got, like I said, sober in a similar environment, and I don't think the vegetables were that great. It's a food service operation. They bought them in bulk, right?
Yes.
But they were good enough for me. I was excited to try something new and to try something different. But if you just serve the food without someone to champion the cause, without someone there to get people excited, to be an example, it is not safe to assume that people will gravitate toward it. I do think that a small percentage of people that enter treatment, detox, residential, will have a calling toward higher fiber plants. But most people will reach for food that's more calorically dense, more dopaminergic, neurochemically rewarding. And having someone to be an example, someone to lead a wellness group and talk about the benefits of these foods. But not just, oh, there's vitamins and minerals in these foods, you should eat them because they're healthy, but also to help people understand the neuroscience of eating, why people choose certain foods, why the early recovery brain is more susceptible to choosing certain types of foods over others, right?
So do you think that shift in choosing better foods and being taught to choose better foods, is that part of the shift of helping the brain to recover and change?
That's part of the neuroplasticity of recovery. And that's the argument that I've made, is that if food is highly neurochemically stimulating and we're trying to rewire the brain so that it's less susceptible to addictive processes, exposing the brain on a daily basis to foods that don't spike the dopamine system will actually teach the brain that it doesn't need a certain threshold of neurochemical reward each day to be okay.
In terms of foods that are rewarding, like foods in a sense that cover both bases,
Yeah.
all the bases.
Yeah.
Like for example, I remember when I was in recovery, and I would get, and it was kind of like a cold day, and I felt lonely, and I'd have a soup.
Yeah.
And for some reason, a soup, like it brought me back to my childhood. It
Yes.
warmed me up, and I was so ready to like eat that soup, even if it was healthy.
Yeah.
What types of foods fall in those categories for you, that in a sense are like win-win situations
Yeah.
for a food service cafeteria in a rehab?
So realistically speaking, most people that are coming into the early stages of recovery will not be ready for a full nutrition intervention, unless they have some history with nutrition and healthy eating, or maybe they have some body image issues or are really into fitness. They might be driven toward that. But a realistic approach for early recovery treatment settings is to combine the two. Combine healthy food with highly palatable food. And the example I can give is that if you serve someone a salad and they're not used to eating vegetables, it doesn't taste good, it's not rewarding, it gives them gas, right? It's a tall order, it's a big ask. But if you crunch up a bag of Doritos and you put it on top of the salad becomes more palatable. You understand what I'm saying? If there's a soup and it has some noodles and some chicken in it, just coming up with an example. We think about how can we add some parsley on it, some sprouts on top, right? What are little things that we can add to foods that make them more colorful, more fibrous, have more protein, and have a better fatty acid profile?
I remember with the salads, a big deal for me was dressings.
Dressings.
Because, you know, I got to the salad bar and all they had was oil and vinegar. And yeah, I like olive oil and vinegar, and that's okay. But it's like, at that point in time, I want the blue cheese. I want some ranch.
Sure.
I want the more indulgent dressing,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yes.
And it seems to me like if you offer those dressings, people are more likely to eat the salads.
Yes, and one of the big topics in nutrition for mental health is the types of fats that are used in foods, right? Whether it be inflammatory fats that are associated with vegetable oils, or what some people call seed oils, versus fats that are known to be anti-inflammatory, like olive oil, avocado oil, etc. So when you were describing the salad bar, you said olive oil and vinegar. I'm like, wow, you can't beat that, right? But people do need more flavor. And so a lot of commercial dressings don't have the best oils in them. And I've had a lot of success with folks in early recovery, even in treatment settings, doing salad dressing workshops where we start to make our own salad dressings, right? Using an avocado oil or an olive oil, and then some sort of a vinegar, mustard, mayonnaise, herbs, maybe even a little honey or agave, and start developing your own salad dressings, and then cutting the salads up into really small pieces, like a chopped salad.
Right.
If you do a chopped salad, throw in some garbanzo beans, some good cheese, make your own dressings, and really toss it up, it's a very different experience than...
And people take ownership.
People take ownership. That's the key.
It's such a huge thing, is like people taking ownership of their own nutrition. And this kind of shifts me to something where, you know, Tarzana Treatment Centers does not only treat adults. We're also, and this is unfortunate, so many of the youth services programs across the state and across this country during this difficult economic period have shut down. There is not as much access to youth services as there used to be. And we have youth services both for mental health and for substance use disorders. But, David, when you talk about the difficulty of dealing with adults.
Yes.
When you're dealing with teenagers, you know, and they're in recovery and they don't want to be there and whatever.
Yeah.
What are the nutritional needs that you can deal with teenagers?
Yeah.
Both in an inpatient setting and also like teenagers who are doing outpatient work as well.
Teens are harder to deal with because their brains are still in development. So there's even more tendency for dopamine-seeking behaviors. And it's a tougher sell, particularly if someone grew up eating a lot of ultra-processed foods. They're not fiber-friendly. And so nutrition education doesn't seem to be as effective as what we're calling hands-on nutrition workshops, right? Getting people to be involved. And with teens, I've used a framework that I call value-based eating, where instead of just teaching people that you need to eat healthy, because that feels like some information that comes from parents, right? It feels like something that people want to rebel against. If you can do some discussion in a group setting and help people find out what their values are, then you can leverage someone's own personal values as a way of changing behavior with respect to food. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people growing up nowadays are frustrated about the systems, right? And sometimes a little bit of education about how food companies manufacture food for maximum reward. They're basically putting private profits ahead of public health. And then to find out that they have very strategic marketing efforts toward marginalized groups, disadvantaged communities, building unhealthy products, and then putting them in prison systems, in low-income neighborhoods.
So if you show kids they're being manipulated,
yes,
those kids
Yes.
will rebel against that and say, no, I want to try something different.
That's the angle.
I didn't get that. I didn't know that.
That's the angle. They say,
Right.
wait a minute, these are social justice issues we're talking about. We're not just talking about nutrition, we're talking about food as being a major tool of oppression for marginalized groups. And in
Right.
today's world, I'm seeing teenagers say, wait a minute, I don't want to be targeted. I don't want to support companies that invest in marketing to keep people disadvantaged. I want to vote for the smaller mom and pop corporations.
So in a sense, what you could do is you could talk to these kids and say, do you realize that these companies with these foods, effectively, they are brainwashing you.
That's right. They don't have your best interest in mind.
And they're manipulating you and they're trying to control you.
That's right. And people get a rebellious spirit to that. I know I did when I learned about the food companies and their tactics and the way that they controlled the narrative around food and health and even how they influenced my training as a nutritionist. I wanted to wake other people up to the structural injustices that exist in our field. And I've had a lot of success providing that education to other people, but it's something that has to be done very gently, because you want to be careful not to be supercharged on certain topics around food, because adolescents and teens are susceptible to going along the spectrum of disordered eating. And so you want to be particularly careful with the youth, because that is a time where people can get a little bit extreme when it comes to food and dieting. So there's this sweet spot between telling people the truth and also encouraging people to find their own path and eat in a way that aligns with their values.
Yeah, and disordered eating is so heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
As we approach the end of part one of this episode, what I was thinking as well is the whole issue of outpatient.
Yeah.
There's so many outpatient services, whether they're intensive outpatient or just regular outpatient, and Tarzana Treatment Centers offers both intensive outpatient and regular outpatient services in both SUD and mental health. But when it comes to outpatient, you don't control the person at all. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You don't control what they're doing. So how, beyond perhaps having these classes and something, like, okay, let's say you're feeding them with a lunch during the day,
Sure.
right? Or you're giving them snacks. How can you do that in such a way that promotes good nutrition and that helps them once they leave and go back home?
I think the life skills part of it is huge, and we called it hands-on nutrition. In the early days of my career, when I did a lot of hands-on work in treatment settings, the most impactful thing that I ever did was take a field trip, a group, to the supermarket or to farmers markets, and to do a walkthrough and help people pick out food. To this day, 12 years later, people have reached out to me and said, your groups were great, but the actual trip to Whole Foods that we took, when we spent 2 hours going aisle to aisle, I'll never forget. I still buy foods that we purchased together that day. So it does become less about mathematical nutrition and knowing the details of vitamins and minerals, and it does become more about hands-on life skills and the actual implementation of it. That's the major gap that we need to fill.
And I've had that experience myself in my life when I go to Costco.
Sure.
Because I go to Costco and I literally have to remind myself as I'm walking in, you don't need to buy a 20-pound bag of crapola.
There it is.
You have to be so careful. And this is where we're coming to the end of part one. And part two is going to be even more exciting, I promise. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is John Lavitt, and welcome back to part two of this episode of Finding Hope, The Road to Recovery, where once again in part two, because part one I thought was really engaging, so in part two I have the same guest, who's Dr. David Wiss. And as I said in part one, David is a functional medicine certified practitioner. And in part 2, we're going to be kind of getting to talking about what that means, and what that means also in the context of like Tarzana Treatment Centers has a principle in which we provide integrated health care. The idea is that we're treating the whole person, and that if we are ignoring certain root causes, or we're ignoring certain conditions that the person is experiencing, then we're not actually providing true health care. That health care isn't about just treating one thing, it's about treating the whole person and everything that needs to be treated in a real integrated fashion. Before we dive into that, David, I remember something that happened between us. And it was a time when you actually like opened a door to me to a whole new thing. And I think this is a way we can get into this topic, which I remember when there was what we can call the gut biome revolution.
That part.
Okay? And I remember when you first started experiencing the gut biome revolution and how it just blew your mind. And you shared it with me like, oh my God, John, you can't believe what's going on here. It's like, you want to know where freedom of choice is? It's here. You know? You want to know what defines so much of your life and what defines so much of your health? It's in your gut. It's not in your brain. I can't believe it. And so I guess I wanted, because you have so much experience with it and expertise, and it applies so much, not just to good nutrition, but to recovery from substance use disorders, recovery from mental health conditions, and good health across the board. If you could talk about the gut biome for a second.
Absolutely. The data that emerged on the microbiome, which is the collective genome of microorganisms that live inside of our GI tract, and the gut microbiota, which is another term we use, really exploded, let's say 15 years ago. And it happened to be right at the time when I was starting my career as a nutritionist, and it changed medicine. Everyone who took a look at the literature was stunned and had so many more questions. 15 years later, we know a lot more about gut bacteria, but we still have only scratched the surface, right? I think a lot of the initial emphasis looked at how the food we eat affects the presence of different bacteria in our gut, and how those bacteria can influence our brain through inflammatory signals or the production of neurotransmitters, et cetera. But we now know that it's not just food that affects our gut inner ecosystem. It's also the environment, the air we breathe, the developmental trauma that we've been exposed to, the caffeine, nicotine, supplements, medications we take. Everything in our environment doesn't just affect us, but it affects our invisible world. And that's what makes gut bacteria research so tricky, is that you can't always control all of these different factors.
There's one thing that you brought up there, which was inflammation.
Yeah.
Inflammation, as far as I understand, in terms of the gut biome, has become a huge issue. Is like, in a sense of like inflammation could be the cause of so many health conditions.
Yes.
And the question is, and what's interesting is like the gut biome is really, in a sense, isn't it like it's like the operating system for inflammation within the human body. Is that correct?
It's not just the microorganisms, but also the intestinal lining, right? The permeability of someone's GI tract. If that becomes compromised, the mucosal layer gets weak, there is a tendency for very invisible particles, bacterial cell walls, LPS, lipopolysaccharides, to enter into the bloodstream. So most people, when you think inflammation, think about acute inflammation where your inflammatory markers are really high. If someone's gut is imbalanced, it can create more of a low-grade chronic inflammation, the type of thing that someone doesn't even know that they have, right?
You know, but also another perfect example is Crohn's disease.
Yes.
Because when I was growing up, I had never heard of Crohn's disease. It was never mentioned. And now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
There's so many ways in which people are being affected negatively by the gut biome and by the intestines and by their digestion than ever before. I know this as well because I go through acid reflux. And a lot of it is in a sense of like, when am I eating?
Yeah.
What am I eating? And am I taking care of myself?
That's right.
But I guess a real interesting question here is, so at Tarzana Treatment Centers, we treat people from really disadvantaged populations. We have people who are unhoused, coming off the streets. We have people from like very low income ethnic populations who have who a lot of those populations are naturally suspicious of medical providers.
Sure.
And for many good reasons when you look at history. Or a lot of them are coming from really desperate and dire circumstances. And so what I'm asking you is, I know what condition those people's brains are in. Are those people's gut biomes, is it just like disaster area 101?
It is probably safe to say that if someone has experienced food insecurity and has used a lot of different substances or ingested a lot of toxic materials.
The old garbage can.
Yes, the gut biome is going to be compromised. It's not just the food that people eat, but also some of the toxins that are in food, the packaging, the plastics. We're living in the era of microplastics, nanoparticles. There's a lot of other constituents of convenience food, ultra-processed food that can be damaging to the gut. But I think the biggest factor is a low-fiber diet. A lot of people that eat convenience foods, because that's all perhaps they can access or afford, they're not getting sufficient grams of fiber on a daily basis to support a healthy gut biome. The recommendations for fiber intake are somewhere around 25, 30 grams per day. The average person in the United States gets about half of that.
Right.
So that tends to be the major systemic challenge that we face, is that a lot of convenience foods, when they create them, they do strip the fiber and they, expose the ingredients to high heat, extrusion and molding, and add flavor compounds, factory style packaging, preservatives. And a lot of that food is delicious and it's rewarding to the brain. And the dopamine response from ultra processed foods overrides the negative effects that people would experience because that's immediate. The inflammatory process that you're referring to, whether it creates depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, or even full-blown inflammatory bowel diseases, that comes very subtly and slowly over time in a way that most people don't even know that they're dealing with it, right?
Yeah. At Tarzana Treatment Centers, because we have such a wide range of patients, when they come in, we always do an assessment.
Good.
And that assessment involves, like that whole idea of the integrated healthcare.
Yes. Biopsychosocial.
Biopsychosocial, right. Is there a way that assessment, and mind you, like I don't do the assessment, so maybe this is already done, and if so, I apologize. I should probably know this. But is there a way for that assessment to include, in a sense, almost like a gut biome type of assessment to understand like which people need more of a focus on their nutrition early on? Have you helped treatment centers do that?
That's the goal. That's the rooftop message that I've been screaming for 15 years, is that if we could integrate a little bit more of the biology at the intake process, that we could move the lever a little bit more.
Right.
The reason why it's not integrated in most places is because insurance doesn't cover it, right? So it would be a cost added, and most places aren't able to do that.
And why doesn't insurance cover it?
Great question. I do think that nutrition has been historically marginalized by the healthcare system,
right,
for a lot of reasons. The more suspicious reason is that the pharmaceutical industry tends to dominate healthcare, right? And it has been argued by myself and many others that a lot of nutrition interventions and functional medicine interventions are somewhat of a threat to the bottom line there. And so they're just very established.
Would you say they're a threat to the bottom line because they address the idea of a chronic condition that is not necessarily chronic?
They would be more addressing the root causes of a lot of problems rather than symptom management, which is the whole idea of functional medicine. It's an approach that looks at systems biology and attempts to look at the underlying dysfunction that causes the problems, right? In our healthcare system, we tend to manage the symptoms. Oftentimes those symptoms can create other problems that we add more management to, right? And so nutrition, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, movement, sunlight, sleep, nutraceuticals, nutrition, there's so much that we can do to pull levers on mental health recovery, but they're just not supported in a way where they can be fully built into programs.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes.
And Dr. Gabor Mate, he says, the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And he says that childhood trauma is like the root cause of all forms of substance use disorders.
Yes.
And that's kind of like, in a sense, much more of a psychosocial type of approach to treatment.
Sure.
In a sense, when you're talking about functional medicine,
Yeah.
you're taking what he says in terms of root causes and turning it into like a biological perspective.
Precisely.
Is that a good comparison?
Functional medicine brings together the biology, the psychology, and the social context, which is why it feels like the perfect home for myself and many others that have diverse training, right? I understand biological mechanisms, I understand the therapeutic angle, and it's an umbrella term that brings them all together. The perfect example is childhood trauma or developmental trauma. There's a lot of research that suggests people that are exposed to multiple ACEs or have other forms of early life adversity have higher levels of inflammatory markers, right? CRPs, TNF alpha.
Right.
They have a baseline inflammation.
And ACEs is adverse childhood experiences.
Yes. And that's been where a lot of the research is done. I actually did my PhD dissertation.
By the way, just quickly, I'm sorry. ACEs is a test that is given, very simple test that actually all Tarzana clinicians, all Tarzana even nurses or technicians are trained now to give the ACEs test.
Good.
To all patients and clients entering our facilities.
And we've advocated for many years for ACE screening in most mental health contexts.
ACE screenings is now universal at Tarzana Treatment Centers.
Good.
And it's so important.
Yeah, the data suggest a dose-response risk between ACEs and drug use, ACEs and depression, and in the context of nutrition, ACEs and disordered eating, and then, like I said, high levels of inflammatory markers. So if someone has a lot of childhood adversity, it would make a strong case to be more focused on an anti-inflammatory way of eating. For example, the Mediterranean diet, where you focus on getting the right kinds of fats through olives and olive oil and nuts and seeds. And that high fiber, colorful approach can actually, not immediately, but over the course of months and years, be an anti-inflammatory approach to the long-term effects of childhood trauma.
And fish as well?
Fish has omega-3, which is like the most notorious anti-inflammatory fatty acid. There are people that don't eat fish, and so we sometimes advocate for chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts for a plant source.
Right.
But I do think that in the context of mental health and anti-inflammatory eating, omega-3 fish oil is probably like the most bang for buck.
Right.
And it should be incorporated at levels of care.
Well, I was thinking as well in the first part when you were talking about fiber, right? And, as you said, 50% of Americans are not getting enough fiber.
That's right.
What do you think about fiber supplements?
Fiber supplements
Are
can
they
be
okay?
very helpful, but most of them are in the form of a isolated fiber, so like a single fiber. You really want fiber to occur in a matrix, right, where there's lots of different fibers. So for example, there are blends where they mill chia seeds and hemp seeds and flax seeds, and those are really good fiber sources, but the best sources of fiber come from whole foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds.
So you said something so interesting here when you use the word matrix. Now, I don't know about you, but The Matrix is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love The Matrix, and I love how that movie brought that word into the mainstream. Because I really think, in a sense, when you're talking about functional medicine, or when I'm talking about like integrated healthcare at Tarzana Treatment Centers, what we're talking about is a matrix of health and services.
That's right.
We're talking about like a matrix in which things are not isolated. God, can I tell you something honest, David?
Please.
I wish there was a magic pill. Don't you?
Sure.
I wish there was a magic wand. I wish there was one thing I could take and everything would be okay.
Sure.
But there's not.
There's not.
And thus, we cannot see things from an isolated perspective.
That's right.
We have to look at the matrix. Can you explain to me, because like, you know, you being a functional medicine certified practitioner is kind of like your latest evolution in a way, you know, and it's a big evolution in which you've really shifted your career in that direction. Can you tell me, in a sense, like why you made that choice and how that choice affects your recovery and helps you help others on the road to recovery?
My first decade of my career was characterized by very much nutrition-focused programming. I built Nutrition and Recovery, my first company. And then I went on to get a PhD from UCLA, and I studied public health and health psychology. And
which was so awesome, by the way.
Thank you so much. And I really learned to bridge nutrition and mental health, which is what sort of stimulated me to build my app, Wise Mind Nutrition. After that, it was very obvious that nutrition by itself wasn't enough of a lever to pull, that people need to get to root causes in some other areas. And I'll give you an example.
I want to mention one thing before you go on. The name of your app, okay? The name, Wise Mind Nutrition.
Yes.
I feel it's so significant that you chose the word wise. That you chose the word wise as opposed to smart mind nutrition or intelligent mind nutrition. Because wisdom has an implication of something that is deeper than just knowledge.
That's right.
And just intelligent. Wisdom has, I would say, like, particularly from like an Eastern spirituality perspective, wisdom always goes hand in hand with what? With compassion.
And a lot of the wisdom that we have with respect to health is ancient. All the stuff we're talking about now of like eating real food, spending time outside, getting sunlight, these are all things that humankind has done and that we've lost. So the wisdom is actually getting back to the old traditions, studying the old ways of pursuing health. And that's a big part of my message with nutrition as well as some other areas. I'll give you one example of how functional medicine testing, specialty lab testing we call it, can be super helpful. There are a lot of toxins in our world and in our food supply. For example, BPA, bisphenol A, is notorious for being in plastics. And so people have tendencies to bioaccumulate. And a lot of people, I had a patient not too long ago that worked at a golf course for many years, and they used chemicals to support, and it was very obvious to me that he had built up, accumulated some stuff that was storing in his body, and he wasn't eliminating it well. It wasn't BPA, it was other stuff, but there was night sweats, there were symptoms of lethargy.
Is there a way to eliminate it?
Yeah, so that's when you really use nutraceuticals to kick your liver's biotransformation processes into gear. Use the sauna, niacin before the sauna. There's a lot of ways to excrete through sweat, urine, feces, etc. If someone's not excreting properly, they're accumulating things that are making them unwell. And so functional medicine figures out what are all the potential root causes of unwellness. Genetic causes, childhood trauma, toxin accumulation, mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammatory cascades, poor eating, gut health, the list goes on and on. So it's very comprehensive.
I love that word inflammatory, or that phrase, inflammatory cascades.
That's the one.
Right now we're approaching the end of part 2. It's incredible how quickly it goes.
Quickly.
It's like whoosh. But I guess in order to like allow you to sum up, right? What I like to know is, so you take the organization that I work for, not my organization, the organization I work for, Tarzana Treatment Centers, and we have a real focus on whole person treatment,
Yes.
and on integrated healthcare. How then can we make our mission to realize whole person healthcare and integrated treatment better through combining it with functional medicine?
Yeah.
In a 1 minute answer.
I think the easiest way to think about the future of healthcare would be to combine ancient practices with modern science, right? So we have AI now where I can comprehensively analyze multiple lab tests at the same time and scour the medical literature. We have a lot of great medications. There's good technology, but we need to also get back to the stuff of yesteryear. The growing food, cooking food, eating with others, getting sunlight, moving our body, being in community. A lot of those old ways, a lot of it's been lost in our modern society with smartphone addiction, isolation, etc. And if we can combine ancient wisdom from indigenous cultures with modern science and bring it all together.
So connecting like food and nutrition to the simplicity of community,
That part.
connection, and interaction. And the idea of like food also being a process in which we're not just buying the food and just throwing it down our throats, but we're actually creating the food and making it, in a sense, like a part of a creative process in which we're saying, you know what, I'm going to focus on making sure that my food is healthy because I believe in health span and living a long, healthy life.
That's right. And
Right.
it's idealistic to think that everyone's going to start growing food. It's not going to happen, right? But people can go the extra mile to procure food from folks who grow it with love and to really establish a relationship with food and to find out what are some nutrients that might be missing, add it in, focus on digestive health, and share it with others.
Yes, and thank you so much, David. We are at an end. We could probably go on for another 2 or 3 hours, but it was a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, John.
And remember, finding hope, the road to recovery. We will see you again.
Brought to you by Tarzana Treatment Centers. You can visit our website at www.tarzanatc.org or call 1-800-996-1051.